We're back. Okay, so what we have got up there, and the mover and seconder have agreed to the change, it's in yellow. We will now debate.
Can I ask some questions about the yellow bit, please?
Or debate question, yeah?
No, because I didn't, that wasn't up before.
No, that's right. You can,
Just the intention of it, is that an intention to have the hearings panel once the new government rules are out? Is that, and so if for any reason the government rule is delayed, what happens there?
You'd have to bring it back to council for a decision.
Okay.
Yeah. But the minister, I mean, as you'd be aware, the minister's been quite decisive quite early, so I would expect some rolls out from him. Pretty
Okay.
sure.
it just stops it being open-ended for people to think, oh, this will carry on till the middle of next year. We don't want that.
And then, if so, the hearings panel will be hearing submissions that have already been made on this work. So, would we need to go back and reconsult with new rules?
Well, it'll be no different to if we proceeded with option 1 today, and that we'll have to get proper advice on whether the hearings panel
No,
can take other
that's
information.
different. Proceeding today is different than
No, it's not. No.
no, because what I'm asking there is if this hearings panel proceeds in the yellow there after the new rules come in,
Yeah.
that changes what submitters might have said during the process.
Correct.
Whereas proceeding
on
today
that-
doesn't, because the new rules are not in
But
yet.
the premise of your question would mean that once the new rules are out, we'd have to redo the whole hearings panel anyway.
No, because if you get certification, you don't need to do
But
that.
that's the premise of
That's
your question.
the reason why we put that
But
in
I'm
there.
just asking about
Okay.
the validity of this and whether it is actually workable, or whether
Council staff have advised Andre and I that it is. Yeah.
so whether you can have a hearings panel on a consultation after rules have changed.
Or
and
we
the
can get
recommendations
the
have
relevant
changed.
person to the table, but I thought Andre came up with a very pragmatic solution.
Just give us 6 months after, essentially.
And council staff have said that it's an amendment, it's a resolution that's capable of being implemented.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Cool. Okay.
Thanks.
Right, so what we'll do is what's up there, we'll go into debate and everyone can go for their life. So who would like to kick off? Sarah.
Kia ora koutou. Everyone here will know someone who's been in a car crash, and most are lucky and walk away, but some are not. Too many people don't make it home, and too many are seriously injured on our roads across the Motu and here in Otatahi, Christchurch. As we see from tomorrow's Finance and Performance Committee meeting agenda, we've had 6 families grieving unnecessarily and 80 hugely impacted by suffering so far this financial year, and likely more to come. In our last hearing on speed management around school speeds, we had many submissions asking for more streets to be made safe through slower speeds, and we had started a process of making our neighbourhoods safer prior to the Labour government's direction, because we were listening to our residents. Going ahead with option 1 now and listening to our communities now will allow us to slow down neighbourhoods where there is good support, to take our community's views into account rather than the view of one person in Wellington. Some say it's a case of individual responsibility, and if someone makes a mistake, it's their own fault if they get injured. But what of those injured or killed by others' mistakes? And what of those who had a chance to stop it and did nothing? We all need to play our part. I've been accused in the past of hiding behind the evidence, although I'm not quite sure what that really means or why using evidence in decision making would be a bad thing. But I'm going to let the evidence presented by the deputies today speak for itself. Many of those around the table have in the past not taken views that not just go against the wishes of a minister, but against the law, as they believe that it was in the best interests of our communities. Our communities are asking for safer streets, and I'm keen to support them. There is no benefit in delaying the hearings panel when we know that that delay will result in other families grieving. And I'm not prepared to face families of those injured or killed and tell them that waiting for the minister to make up his mind was more important, and I don't know many who are. We owe it to all of those who use our streets, young and old and in between, to keep them safe, and I hope my colleagues agree.
Thank you very much. Sam? Yep.
Look, I think this is more about the process today than anything, and inevitably you're always going to have tensions and changes when governments change. The government have come through and been quite clear in what they're looking at and are acting, relatively quickly, I guess, on those rules. So I kind of look at it and go, actually, this is about just ensuring we're lining it up so that the people that are coming to that hearings panel actually have the ability to make an informed, position. I appreciate they've written submissions already, but I would like to think that we are able to take into account their views when they come along, knowing what the government have planned. So, look, I don't think, and I appreciate Sarah's views on it, but I'm just sort of thinking in terms of this being a process thing today, it's not necessarily about people wanting people to die. I think that would be an unfortunate sort of position to put people in. This is about lining things up so that we can get a hearings panel that, the people that are prepared to take the time and engage in society or engage in our decision-making process have the absolute ability to be fully informed when they do it. So, look, I don't think this is about personal views or, it's not necessarily helpful to personally attack people. It's more about this whole idea of just having a process that lines up based on, again, what the government have signalled. I just note in the minister's letter, he says, I consider it as undesirable for RTCs and RCAs to apply public money and resources in developing speed management plans only to have to revisit the plans when the new rule takes effect. Given this, if you've not already finalised your speed management plan, I encourage you to consider the new rule before making the final decisions. And I just say that because I want to thank the council staff for coming along today, which on quite a contentious issue, but actually just giving us the option to consider that. And I hope that the council go, actually, let's line these things up this year. As we've heard, it doesn't affect the school zones. It doesn't affect the work that was signed off in July of last year. This is about ensuring alignment and obviously just acknowledging, I think, the work that Andre's done in terms of adding to the resolution, which signals to the community that we are still committed to having the hearings panel, but we want them to have as much information as possible before we proceed with that.
Thank you. Jake, please.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the foreshadowed, mainly because we've heard in the staff advice that we can progress with our speed management plan. There's no barrier to sign off, and the current rules are in force. We know that we've expended most of the decision-making resources already, and we've also heard that a speed management plan will keep people safe. And we also intuitively know that we can tweak and change the plan as much as we wish after we've heard from people and when we come to make a decision. What remains really unclear, actually, is what will happen in the future. And I don't think we should really be in a position of thinking that a reversal is a guarantee. I think there's a lot of water to go under the bridge when we think of how do you define a blanket speed management plan. So I think it's really easy to send out a press release saying you're going to reverse this, that and the other, but actually it's a lot trickier to do that. We're still the road controlling authority. We have a responsibility to the people of Christchurch to do that as we see fit and in a way that keeps them and their children safe. So I say let's go forth, hear from the people as they would expect. Let's do our jobs. Let's not cut this process off at the legs. The reality is I don't want to die in a ditch over all aspects of this plan. If we get to hearings and we find out that actually the safety benefit in some places is marginal, but it's wildly unpopular, then we can take that time and consider that in an area by area way. But equally, I want to be able to get to the point where we can weigh up actually safety versus value for money versus community support. But to cut this process off now would deny us the ability to do that. So with that, I encourage people to support the foreshadowed.
Okay, Melanie?
I fully support option 1 and going ahead with the hearings. We need to hear the voices of the submitters now and we shouldn't leave them hanging. The only reason anyone would want to pause or stop hearings is if they don't agree with implementing safer speeds. It's quite simple. Those opposed to safer speeds say good drivers who are watching the road are able to respond to pedestrians and cyclists, so they would never hit one. However, there are times when it may be impossible for a driver to avoid a pedestrian. If that occurs, do we want them to have a 90% chance of survival or only 10%? Those opposed to safer speeds say the chances of a pedestrian or cyclist being hit by a car is very low, so why make a change? This attitude makes it clear they believe some deaths or injuries are so unlikely we shouldn't attempt to eliminate those chances altogether. Why bother? It's only a few kids. The economics argument is flawed. It's the connector or arterial routes to another suburb that are clogged at peak times. Slower speeds on residential streets barely make a change, if any, to travel times. Spraden's already 30 kilometres an hour on residential roads. And I have to admit, when I'm driving, I'm one of those rat runners. I avoid busy Sparks Road and I take Simeon and Bletsoe Ave to get to Strickland Street. I can tell you that taking those streets at 30 k's rather than 50 doesn't make it any slower. I still end up waiting to get into the queue of traffic on Strickland Street no matter what. Even if slower speeds were to take you another minute or more to get to your destination, isn't that time something you would hand over multiple times over in a heartbeat if you thought it might save a loved one's life? Why not pay that perceived time forward? Pay it ahead of time to save someone's life in the future. And I'll tell you what really slows traffic down: car accidents. So let's be the leaders of the city who are not afraid to hear from the submitters before the government tries to stop us having autonomy over our own decisions. Let's vote for safer speeds. Let's vote for fewer crashes. Let's vote for less wasted time dealing with insurance. Let's vote for fewer and less severe injuries. Let's vote to save lives. Let's vote to do what's right for those who are vulnerable on our roads. Let's vote for option 1 to proceed with the hearings. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to have safer speeds right throughout our city. Waiting will mean we've lost our chance. Let's be bold and brave and take it now.
Kelly?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'd like to take the drama out of the argument. It seems desperate to rush this through. To me, it makes sense to wait. I'd like to hear from the government first. I don't see the need to rush it through. We've got an imminent decision coming from the government, which will give us much greater clarity on this. I get contacted by a lot of residents who are confused by the different speeds around it, and I'd like to see something that makes more sense. So I'm happy to wait.
Okay, thank you. Tim?
Yeah, to being a member of a family that know only too well the tragedy of a road accident and the of continually living with it, I think that's an unfair discussion and argument to have. I have been an advocate for community slow speeds from the very start. As soon as I was elected, I was hounding Wakatahi with regards to slow speeds in front of schools, although they fell short with regards to taking so much time. We were talking decades of putting this in. This has been a standard overseas, and then they pulled the plug and wouldn't look at U-turns, outlawing U-turns in front of schools. So that's still allowed, because at the end of the day, it is driver behaviour in front of schools and other areas. They drop their precious ones off, and then they don't care about anyone else's. So it's about self-awareness and self-responsibility for others. I'm a great advocate and I love slow speeds. I see Beckenham and other areas, but I am aware that it takes time to get this right. So there are areas like Valley Road and others where there is confusion with the signage and different speeds, and our staff are working on that at the moment. And if we're looking at timing, our staff are coming out of the long-term plan. They will need time to lick their wounds, because that is a mammoth task of communication with our people, and there will need to be a time for our staff to gather breath. So I don't see a major delay if we delay this now, and it may be for as little as 4 weeks. It could be 8 weeks, but we're not talking about a great length of time. But what we need is the information, the correct information for people when they come to us with this. And I think that is the key here. Information. It's the inquisitive mind based on truth. And that's what we need with this hearings panel. As I said, my family know more than most about tragedy with regards to this. I am an advocate and always have been for slow speeds, and I take exception being told that if I vote one way or the other, I'm all for that, for danger on roads, etc. I will be supporting the staff recommendation, because I think that when it comes out, it must be done properly and done with the correct information and the truth. Thank you.
Okay, Mark?
Thank you. I concur with Councillor Scandrett. My family very well knows the tragedy of losing loved ones. My parents were killed in a car crash 30 years ago. So to try and, make me feel poor for making a decision that's really sensible and wise, and I'm certainly going to be supporting the staff recommendation here, because wisdom says going where angels fear to tread and trying to preempt the rule is just lunacy. So I will certainly be supporting this option so that we can have all the time that we need to get this right. Do it once, do it right. We heard from staff today about potentially having to undo changes should the rules come in as we expect. That, to me, in a time when we're really struggling for economic viability around the council, to go and waste money by implementing and then having to undo it, that doesn't make any sense. So let's press the pause button. Let's give the minister some time to give us definitive rule so we know where we're actually heading, and we can get it right when we do proceed. So I'm all for hearing from the public, and I'm all for making good decisions, but good decisions need to be based around what we know and what the rule will say.
Thank you. Victoria.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Let's just be really clear. It's been said by Councillor McDonald that today is not about the merits of safe speed, which is a really emotive topic. If you've heard, today is simply about the process, and that's all. And we are proposing a process that lines up. And importantly, it doesn't affect the school zones that we've heard a lot about today. I want to thank those who have taken the time to come into the chamber and present to us today. However, with the greatest respect, I think that what we heard today was a very narrow glimpse of actually what the public sentiment is, and most presenters appear to have misunderstood what our decision making is today, which is solely about the process. Thank you, Councillor Peters, for referencing the financial constraints. We are in the middle of a long-term process, long-term plan process. We're repeatedly hearing from our residents about the financial pressure they're under, and that they expect us to also show financial responsibility. And it's the resource used to implement the plan which is going to be the real cost here, and not so much the decision making itself. The two questions that I'm asking myself today in determining how to vote is, does it make sense to engage in a process when we don't have the full information? You've heard from Councillor Peters about that, and the answer to that's got to be no. And is this the best use of our ratepayer money? And surely the answer to that is also no. We're only talking about a couple of months, that's the reality, and I'm not prepared to pull money down the drain on that. And today my preference would be to adopt the more cautious approach, wait and see, and I think that that's the responsible thing to do.
Okay, Pauline?
Yeah, look, most of it's been said, so I won't take long, but to pause or not to pause, and pausing will slow down a process that we're well into, and I believe that we really need to respect the people who have come in and engaged in this process to date. Well over 1,000 of them have spoken to us, and we do risk a bit of reputational risk if we pause this now. And it might be 2 months, it might be 3, it might be 4. We don't know what's going to happen at the government level. They might be delayed for any reason, I don't know. We don't know how long that time is going to be. I say let's keep going, let's respect the people that have fed into this, and I believe that we can prove economic benefits through the work that we're doing here. And I also believe that we can get around a blanket approach. And those two things seem to be what the changes might hinge on. I don't think there's a big risk here in proceeding at all. And I'd really urge everyone to support the foreshadowed motion and support option 1.
Celeste?
As local decision makers, we all have a responsibility for making our streets safer for all residents in Otautahi. So this plan and this process is a big part of it. We've already heard that the community wants us to continue with the process, and we've already committed to it. We often hear about the importance of local decision making. That's why sticking with the usual hearings panel process with the full council is not just about slower, safer streets, but it's also about supporting local democracy. We want our communities to trust us, and this option allows us, foreshadowed option allows us to continue with this process and not let this council be dictated to by Wellington. The hearings panel allows us to further hear from our residents as they've asked us to and consult. Let's remember that slower, safer streets have a lot of other benefits. It's not just a smart move for safety, but we know that it's better for an economy and environment too. Reduces pollution, congestion, and protects all road users, including kids walking to school. And just to be clear, we're not talking about slowing everyone down for no reason. These changes have been requested by many in our communities, and they're backed by good evidence. Lowering speed limits in our neighbourhoods near schools is something we should all get behind, and it's about protecting our kids and looking out for each other. Let's not put off making things better. Delaying this plan only means waiting longer for the benefit it brings. Delaying this until the minister makes up his mind undermines confidence in council processes. We've seen this before. Arguments to continually delay decisions is simply another way of saying you don't want it to go ahead. We owe it to ourselves and future generations to act now for safety, to show leadership and to build confidence in local decision making. So I ask you each to back the foreshadowed motion and stick with the usual hearings panel process with the full council. Let's work together.
Okay, righto. I think, Aaron, then Andre.
Yeah, the term safer speeds is a very emotive term and was used a lot here this morning. And it is good to get the evidence. And obviously, someone being hit at different speeds has a different outcome, or vehicles crashing at different speeds has different outcomes. And I sent a message through before to someone that works in road policing to find out the number of fatalities per year of people doing 50 in the 50k areas, abiding by the rules, and it's usually 0 is the number each year. Where accidents happen are completely different situations, usually excessive speed, and no matter what the marking is, it doesn't change. I remember a 14-year-old Aaron hopping in a car with a couple of strangers in the front, and his cousin and her friend sat in the back, and we went at 130k an hour on a gravel road and then hit a lamppost. And my cousin, who's my best friend, is no longer with us. She was killed that night, and that ruined her parents' lives as well as mine, and set me on a goal around trying to reduce road tolls and stuff as we go forward, which brings me to my next one. When a few years ago, my mother was coming home from a quiz night that I was hosting up the top end of Marshlands Road, when two guys were racing at beyond 160k an hour, and they clipped each other and then ploughed through the car my mother was in as she was heading home, and she was killed, and the guy driving that car was quite badly injured and still walks with a bad limp today. So yeah, I do know the impacts. So when I make decisions around speed, they are ones that come from my head and my heart, and 50k an hour or 30k an hour, if people are abiding by the road rules, the impacts are extremely low. It's the enforcement of people doing excessive speeds, of stealing cars and ploughing into someone on their way to work, at the hospital at 3 a.m. Those are what take people's lives on the roads of Christchurch. And no matter what we set as speed limits, we won't save those lives. So I'll stick with the staff recommendation here. There's also the reputational risk to the council if we go through one particular process and lead the public down a road that has essentially a dead end, and we have to start again and come up with another outcome. That's not a good look. It's a waste of resource. It's a waste of time. Like many have said, let's do it once, let's do it right. And we all have members here at the table. So Mark, kind of in a weird, sad way, we're brothers of the same loss.
Thank you. Andre, please.
Thank you. Yeah, this has always been a contentious issue, and in my travels over the year, I've found that most people want lower speed limits on their streets, but they don't want lower limits on their commute anywhere, which makes our life pretty difficult as decision makers and actually getting a proper idea from the public as to what they want on our streets. I don't believe there is strong public buy-in for blanket 30k limits. There are mixed views on that, but I do believe there actually is really good consensus on lower speed limits around our schools and our school areas to 30k's. I have found in my travels good consensus on that. I've barely found anyone who doesn't support that. I also reckon we've come to a time where there's some reasonable support for 40k limits around residential areas that aren't near schools or on main roads as well. A few years ago there wouldn't have been that, but I do believe that does exist now. The direction from central government a few years ago was 30k's around school areas. councils chose to go further than the school areas, in some cases much further. What that ended up doing is sort of taking away from the reason that we were telling people it was being done, which was around school areas. What it ended up doing was it rolled the public up. Then the opposition, they seized on that. They made it a policy to put a stop to all of this 30k business. Safe speeds around schools ideally would have never become a political issue, but unfortunately we've come to a time where that is what's happening, and that's really unfortunate. And we shouldn't also be getting into a position where the government is promising to or committing to reversing speed limits that councils have decided. We should never quite got to that position either. But it is, in my view, in some ways, councils going further than they had the public mandate for, which has led to those kinds of commitments. The main political parties really should be able to agree on things like safe speeds around our schools, and I'm saddened that they didn't. They should have done that. We don't want to be changing these things over and over again. We have heard from people wanting commitment to hearings panel. I think that's very, very fair, and that's why I asked for an amendment to do exactly that, which is commit to hearings panel by the end of this year as soon as practicable. I agree we need to hear from people. Those hearings need to be meaningful, they need to be informed, they need to be thorough. And it sounds to me like the difference will potentially be a few weeks that will end up leading to safety improvements that will actually stick. We're all sick of reversing changes, we're sick of changing changes, and continued changes to government policy are really challenging. So if we are making changes, I want changes that are going to actually stick. And I believe the public, actually, regardless of where they sit, also want us to see changes that stick and not chopping and changing. That is my view, and that is where I've landed today.
Thank you. We haven't heard from you, Yanni. You're good? You're good. Tyrone, you're good? Okay. No, fine. Thank you very much. Right. So I dare say the word division will come out of someone's mouth. So before I put this motion, well, I will put the motion. All those in favour, and Katie will do division. Thank you.
So just be clear on what we're voting on.
Yes. All right, this is a division on item 5. This is for the staff recommendations as on screen, which means to approve option 3, which is to pause the hearings panel. All right. Councillor Moore.
Yes.
Councillor Johansson.
No.
Deputy Mayor. Councillor McClellan. Councillor Barber.
Yes.
Councillor Goff.
Yes.
Councillor McDonald.
Yes.
Councillor Kuhn.
Yes.
Councillor Fields.
No.
The Mayor.
Yes.
Councillor Scandrick.
Yes.
Councillor Harrison Hunt.
No.
Councillor Coker.
No.
Councillor Templeton.
No.
Councillor Donovan.
No.
Councillor Peters.
Yes.
Councillor Henstock.
Yes.
9-4. 8 against.
Thank you. So that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we wrap up with a karakia. Tapu, te wate, te ara, te huri, whakatahai, te huri, whakatahai, homie, hui, ai. Thank you very much.